Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our final tutorial for this semester. And it's one in which I'm going to give you some more help in compiling a comparative essay. At this stage, I hope you've actually written your essay, and you can use this as a kind of a checklist and see if there's anything in it that inspires you to add a last paragraph or something like that. Good. Remember that you can still submit your essay until next Wednesday, but unfortunately, if you submit it after midnight tonight, you will start incurring a bit of a penalty for lateness. Great. So let's start with our slide show straight away. And I have already said that, so let's look at paragraph 2. This is the actual assignment, the wording of your assignment number 3. Write an academic paper comparing 2 of the prescribed plays. Your essay should be 1,000 to 1,200 words long, and please remember to record the actual number of words at the end. And you must choose one of these questions. You can't make any choice of any of the 2 plays and give yourself your own assignment. You have to choose one of these questions and indicate clearly in your title which one you have selected. Right, question 1 is the longer one. It's the one that compares the island and Death of the King's Horseman. So it says, comment on this criticism of Fugard's play The Island as compared to Death and the King's Horseman by Soyinka. You may agree, disagree, or partly agree, but you have to support your opinion by referring to specific details in the texts. Now, they said comment on this criticism, and here is the criticism in quotation marks, okay? And then the single quotation marks are for the names of the plays. The Island is about African people in South Africa, but it is not essentially an African play. The play is rich in human terms, filled with compassion, but ultimately it is not convincing. Death and the King's Horseman, on the other hand, is culturally rooted, and it does not make unnecessary concessions to European art. So this critic feels that Death and the King's Horseman is a truly African play and The Island is not. So you have to ask, what does African mean, actually? And you don't have to agree with the critic, and you don't have to agree with the criticism. Now, those are 2 separate points, okay? In other words, he says The Island is ultimately unconvincing, but maybe you disagree with that. And you can explain why, if you do. And you can disagree with his conclusion, or you can agree with it in some ways. All this is food for your essay. So what you think about this is what you will write about. Questions 2 and 3 both remind you of the same thing. Look here, referring to both plays in some detail, and also by referring in detail to the texts. In other words, don't just generalize, that is boring. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. We'll start giving an example, a character, a scene, a quotation to prove what you are saying. Okay, so question 2. Do you think Fugard's use of Antigone by Sophocles in The Island is a brilliant stroke of genius or an insensitive mistake? Support your opinion by referring to both plays in some detail. So there's the original Antigone, and then there's a man acting Antigone in a prison concert. And do you think it works? Do you think this brilliant man, Fugard, together with the two actors, because remember they worked it out together, the three of them, John Carney and Winston Chawner. Do you think they managed to pull this off and that it's moving and amazing, or do you think it's actually a flop in the end? So you've got to refer to specific things and say, here, this is why I say it works or it doesn't work. Okay. Question 3 is the one that compares the Greek and the Nigerian plays. Antigone by Sophocles and Death and the King's Horseman by Soyinka have completely divergent settings. Yet, both plays make use of a chorus of some sort, and both rise surely from the societies in which they are set. In your essay, show why and how this statement is true by referring in detail to the texts. So these statements are true. They are both true. You shouldn't disagree with that because they do both use a chorus and they are both rooted in their own cultures. But you've got to show how and where and why. Okay. The chorus in Death and the King's Horseman is not a formal chorus as it is in Antigone. It's actually the market women and their leader who act as a chorus. But there's enough material for you in your lessons, in the study guide and so on, and in your own intelligent minds to figure out how and why they actually fulfill the same function. Great. Now, in order to help you, I want to give you some ideas on what to compare, because now you're getting down to the nitty-gritty of actually writing this play. And of course, first and foremost, study the question carefully. Be sure to answer whatever is required. Don't leave anything out, don't change anything, and don't go way off on a tangent. Okay. If that doesn't give you enough material for an essay, then there's more. In addition, because these are plays, you could possibly compare these aspects given below. But remember, these are not compulsory, so don't force them if they don't fit in with your understanding. What's in the question you must answer. But these 6 bullet points are not actually required. They're just suggestions that you might want to make use of. You could compare characters. So compare the original Antigone, the woman, with Antigone, the man, who acts that role in the prison play. And you can also discuss character development if there is any. Sometimes the character at the end of the play is exactly the same as he or she was at the beginning of the play. There's no character development, although there might be a lot of tension and interaction. But find ways in which the personae are similar and in which ways they are different. Remember that comparative essays mean you compare similarities and also differences. Okay. Another thing you can look for is dramatic irony. Have you forgotten what that is? It's in Unit 1. I'll remind you quickly. In a play, you have an audience and you have a number of different characters. Now, if any one of those knows something that any one of the others doesn't know, you have dramatic irony. So if the actors know what's going on, but the audience is sitting there in the dark, then that's dramatic irony. Sometimes the audience knows what's happening, and so does one of the characters, for example. But the other characters don't know. And you're sitting and waiting to see what's going to happen when they find out. That's dramatic irony. And you can see that it immediately creates some tension. And you can ask yourself, where is the playwright using dramatic irony in play number 1? And does he use it also, or the other playwright, in play number 2? And then you can compare their use of dramatic irony. Don't forget, it's sometimes very useful to compare settings. This play is set in Athens before the birth of Christ, whereas this one is set in South Africa in the 1970s, or in Nigeria in the 1930s. So there's time and there's place for your setting, and it's useful to say, what does that mean for the play? What was the background? What were the circumstances? Right. Of course, there is also the plot or the story and the way it unfolds. Is it complex? Are there twists and turns? Is it straightforward? Does it have a high climax or not? Okay, those things can be compared. Finally, no, actually second last. Why did the playwright write this play? What was his aim? What was he hoping that people would see or understand after seeing his play? And by the way, I want you to notice that playwright is spelled P-L-A-W-W-R-I-G-H-T, one word. A similar word is wheelwright, because we're not thinking about the writing with a pen and paper. We're thinking about crafting physically in a practical way, making and building up this play the way you would make a wheel. And a very important thing to compare is the language of the playwright. For instance, Soyinka's language is very rich in African proverbs, as the study guide mentions. It's also very poetic, and that is a contrast with the language of either of the other two plays. And again, give examples, quote, to support your answer. Right. Now, here's a helpful suggestion for you on how to tackle. Maybe you've made your list, as you should do. You've got your points that you're going to compare, and you're ready to write. How are you going to tackle the content? I repeat, you'll be looking at similarities as well as differences. And here are the two main methods you can choose between. The first method is to take it point by point, and the second method is play by play. Let me explain this. If you do it point by point, then you alternate between the plays. You take a point, like, for example, the character, and you say the main character in play number 1, blah, 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 everything you want to say about him. And then you jump to play number 2 and you say the main character in play number 2, blah, 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 blah. Now that could be one paragraph. And your topic sentence could be, I'm going to be discussing character, or let's look at the main character in the two plays. But if you've got a lot to say, then you can discuss the main character of play number 1 in one paragraph, and the main character of play number 2 in the next paragraph. But the main thing is that you will be alternating between the plays point by point. But in method 2, you take, for instance, play number 1 and you stick with it. And you describe everything you want to say about play number 1 in a few paragraphs. Then you go to play number 2 and you discuss those same points, because you've still got to compare and contrast, but in a few more paragraphs, all about play number 2. So choose one of those two methods. I think method number 1 is a little easier for the student, and by the way, for the person who has to mark the essay. But method number 2 gives you a little more freedom. It's also a little more dangerous because you could go off topic more easily. So choose and stick to what you decide. You know what you're going to compare, and you know the system of writing you're going to use now. Now, how do you actually compare them? The most important thing I'm reminding you once again is to be as specific as possible. Don't generalize. If you can give a detail or an example, quote some keywords in quotation marks, of course, where they are relevant. Don't quote for the sake of quoting, but do quote when it's relevant. And of course, then you close your quotation marks and immediately give your inline reference, and give the full reference in the bibliography at the end. Now, here's some interesting advice. And if you've never been told this before, then I'm very honored to be the person who can tell you this, because you are going to find it helps you. Plan and write the paragraphs of the body first. In other words, first write the body, the bulk, the meat of your essay. Make all the points you're going to make and finish them. And then the second thing you write after the whole essay is your conclusion, because your head will be full of all the information you've been using, and you should be inspired to write a powerful conclusion that in fresh new words brings together everything you've been trying to say. Don't put new information in the final paragraph or the conclusion. And oh, look at this last paragraph. It's got an interesting point. Because you've been writing a comparative essay, you may, if you wish, cast a vote in the conclusion. In other words, having considered everything, do you wish to pass a judgment? Do you want to take sides? Do you want to say yes? This playwright has been much more successful perhaps than the other one, but don't be too harsh and don't be emotional. Remember that this is an academic essay and you're making an academic judgment based on what you have proved with all your evidence from the play. When I say give details and be specific, it's like being a good lawyer in a court case. You are bringing the evidence from which to judge. And then lastly, excuse me, go back to paragraph 2 here. The last thing you write is your introduction. And if you do this, you will thank me, because it will be so much easier. Now you know what's in the essay. So of course it's much easier to write your thesis statement, to say what the essay is really about. And remember that the thesis statement alone is not really enough for an introduction. You also need to write something that will grab the reader's attention immediately, something tantalizing to make them want to read on and hear more about what you have to say. So I would start with some sort of a hook to catch a fish, and then I would work my way on to the thesis statement, and that would be the end of the introduction, which you write last. Good. Now that is the end of that part. Everything that I can say to you about how to write a comparative essay. And I hope it's given you ideas of how to improve or add something to your essay. But now we're going to end our semester by just looking at an interesting reading passage. And at the end of it, there will be some questions, and you can see if you know the answers by listening well as we go along. Now, this passage is called Ngoma. That's not an English word, N-G-O-N-A, Ngona. And Ngona has many meanings. Most South Africans, or many South Africans, know it as the name of a kind of drum, a tall drum, that you put maybe between your knees, and then you beat on it with your fingers or a drumstick. But This passage was written by, no, it wasn't written by, it was adapted from things written by Patrick Mellett, who is a wonderful scholar and who knows a lot about our cultural history. He himself is a so-called coloured person, and so when he says we and us, he's mainly addressing himself to that community, but he's definitely addressing himself to all of us. And I think we should pay attention because it's a wonderful passage. So let's read it together. There are aspects of our heritage that are highly camouflaged, none more so than what some call ngoma and others guma. Ngoma was brought to the Cape by the Mazbikar slaves. Mazbikars, oh no, I didn't want to do that. Mazbikars were the slaves that came from a wide range of countries in East and Southern Central Africa to the slaver station in Mozambique, and then on to the Cape of Good Hope. The Ngoma found ways to blend with the trance dances and chants of the Kuna, Okoi, and Sun, very old-fashioned names with the Hottentots and the Bushmen, which are far too negative to use these days. Though Ngoma means drum, it also is the name of a set of spiritual practices that can be found across Southern Africa in many cultures. And it also means music in some Central African languages. There are the pictures. South Africa has a Heritage Day on the 24th of September. For some, this is yet another occasion to take time out from working, if one is lucky enough to have a job, enjoy a dop, braai meat, and party. Party acting as a verb there. Others have turned it into Braai Day, which is being commercially exploited, and yet others have reduced it to socio-political statements about a variety of causes draped in heritage regalia. And here I think Mellett is poking fun at all the groups, the coloured people who enjoy their dop and their party so much, and the whites who enjoy their braai so much, and some people are making money out of it, and the political parties and so on who make it political with banners and badges and medals and things like that. I want to invite you to listen to it and allow the Ngoma to speak to you as it has spoken to people over the centuries. This is surely a significant artifact of our heritage. We should reflect on the triumphs and the tears and the collective spirit of the living and the dead who have faced and risen above adversity. Why don't we allow the drum to tell us something? Or are we too noisy to hear its message? White noise often seems to blind us and deafen us. Our land and people cry out for healing, for social balance, and yet the syncretic values of Ngoma, a gem of our heritage, has been set aside. Most people are so alienated from it that they do not even know it. Sit still and hear the drum beat. Explore the thoughts that it inspires about the social and political scene, about ordering and transforming. I'd like you to take a note of two words on this page. The first word is syncretic. He says this power, this drum has syncretic power, and you can see that the prefix comes from synthesize and so on, and it means it has the power to combine and to harmonize. Even though things don't merge 100% and they're still heterogeneous in the way they're enjoyed, they do come together. So the way coloured and black and white people look at the Ngoma may be all different, but we should at least all be looking at it. That's what he's saying. Now, the other word I want you to notice is the word alienated. Right, because you're going to need those later. The final paragraph. Our heritage is not for iconizing or commodifying. And I just want to explain those. We shouldn't make an icon out of this drum. It shouldn't be a little badge that is exploited for some reason. It shouldn't be in a museum. It shouldn't be a commodity either, a bit like the vuvuzela, which is a bit of a joke when you think the original vuvuzela was the cattle horn, the horn of a cow that people used to blow through and make a much nicer noise than the plastic one makes. And now it's become a commodity and people are making money out of it. He says, no, we mustn't put it on a pedestal either. Somehow we must find a way for our heritage to work. So let's read this paragraph. Our heritage is not for iconizing or commodifying and putting on a pedestal, but it ought to work for us, to speak justice to us, to bind us, to work for transformation, to inspire, to build, to take all those many contributions of our ancestors who fought for so much and to give them life. When he says them, he means the contributions. We must give all the contributions our ancestors made new life. The sound of the cowhide drum, the rhythm of the dance, the manifestation of the spirits, the culture which binds us across time as one great soul, the dust thrown up as our Sun and Kuna ancestors danced around the fire, the sounds of voice and drum, the ngoma of the Mazbikar slaves. All of this was more than ritual and outward show. Do we contemplate its deeper meaning? At the end of our next Heritage Day, let us contemplate a while the power of this deep indigenous culture and the place it should have today. Right. A while is one word here because it means for a little time. But if you say something like a while ago, that would be 3 words. Here's the bibliography. Patrick Mellett is the man I talked about, and this is an article by him. The 7 steps of District 6 are what he uses symbolically to explain the 7 threads of people who came to the Cape and made up what is today the Cape-coloured identity, or indigene. Indigene is a wonderful word related to indigenous people. Kamissa was the name, Kamissa was the name of the first little river that ran down from Table Mountain down Adderley Street into Table Bay. And that's the water that they gave to the passing ships, for instance. It's dried up today, it was diverted and it dried up eventually, but not before the Dutch had made it into a canal and called it the Herengracht, meaning the canal where the gentlemen walk. And we still have the Herengracht as a name. So if you're interested in this, he's a brilliant scholar, then remember, Kamissa people, WordPress, and go and read about it. Another interesting book was The Quest, or still is, The Quest for Fruition Through Ngoma, The Political Aspects of Healing in Southern Africa, edited by 3 Dutch people, et al. Means and others, and published in the African Studies Center of Indiana University. Right, here are the questions. Why were slaves from such a wide area all called Mazbikers? And yes, you can type in the chat if you have an answer for me, or you can type an answer in questions and answers. And after I've given you a moment, I'll give you the answer so you can see how you're doing. They didn't all come from Mozambique, of course. They were called Mozambicers because they all came through Mozambique. There was a slaving station there, and people who were captured or bought or sold or given away in very many areas of Africa all came through that slaving station, and they were called the Mozambicers in the early 19th century and some of the 18th century as well. What was the first home of the Ngoma in South Africa? And explain how it fitted in. It found a home, yes, among the San and the Khoi people, and it fitted in perfectly with their chants and their trance dancing because it was used in similar ways in other parts of Africa. What's a dop? And why does the writer put this word in quotation marks? Oh yes, quite right, it's an alcoholic drink. And he puts it in quotation marks not only because it's slang, but because it's Afrikaans slang. So he can't just use it in an English essay. Do you agree that Ngoma has been camouflaged in our heritage? Explain your answer. Now, that's an opinion I want from you, so there's no right and wrong answer here. If you think that Ngoma is visible enough, that enough South Africans know it, then you will say, no, it's not camouflaged. Or if you think it is camouflaged because it's used wrongly or only some people know it, then you can say that. Question 5 has 3 sections, and you must just choose the one that you believe is correct. So, the Guma originally came from Asia, is being commercialized, is a nickname of the Ngoma, or is being put on a pedestal. No, he said, he warned that it must not be put on a pedestal, and he said that Braai Day is being commercialized, and he specifically said that the Guma did not come from Asia, as some people think, although they do also have drums of that shape in Asia. Those Asian drums might have come from the African many thousands and thousands of years ago, not the other way around. So the answer is that it is a nickname of the Ngoma, especially in the Western Cape. 5.2. Heritage regalia would be a worthy cause on the 24th of September, superficial traditional decorations, a troupe of drummers in traditional dress, and possibly a significant artifact like the Ngoma. Artifact is a wonderful word. It just means anything that has been made by humans as a part of their culture. So heritage regalia, yeah, they are the decorations, the banners and the ribbons and the badges that people use for their special occasions. It tends to be a rather superficial business, according to Millet. Right. When the writer mentions our ancestors who fought for so much, who's he thinking of? The soldiers of the South African War, the freedom fighters of the apartheid era, our San and Kuna ancestors, or the Mozambique slaves. Now, it's not number 1 because that was sometimes nicknamed the white man's war, British and Boers fighting each other, although of course it wasn't, and they involved the black people in the most disgusting ways sometimes. But he certainly isn't thinking of that, or he's not thinking of the apartheid era either, because that's far too recent. This passage is about the Ngoma and where it comes from. And that's why the best answer is number 4. The ancestors are the Mozambique slaves who brought it here. The second best answer would be the San and Kuna ancestors. What is white noise? Well, that's a bit unfair to ask because they use the term white noise in the passage, but they don't explain it. So I would never ask you this in an exam or anything like that. But white noise is background noise, which is there and it's irritating, but you don't need to pay it any attention. For example, if you are listening to the news on an old radio and there's a lot of static crackling away, that static is white noise. It's there, it's irritating, but you don't have to listen to it. If you live next to a railway line, a visitor might say to you, wow, those trains are so noisy. And you'll probably say, you know what? I don't even hear them anymore. Because for you, they've just become white noise. It's a background noise. You don't have to pay it any attention. It's a useful phrase to know. Here are the words I asked you to make a note of. So which word means reconciliation or fusion of different systems of belief, as in philosophy or religion, especially when success is partial or the result is heterogeneous? Yep, that was that word, syncretic. S-Y-N-C-R-E-T-I-C. 7.2. Estranged, withdrawn, or unresponsive, isolated, or dissociated emotionally. That was alienated. And remember that you can be alienated from somebody. It's a strong word. One fight will not alienate you. But if you've been doing nothing but fight with your brother for 20 years and you've told him you never want to see him again, then you are alienated. And some people are even alienated from all of society inside themselves, and that's a psychological problem. Now, these are questions from the bibliography, and since this is a tutorial with slides, you haven't got the bibliography in front of you anymore, so I suggest you do this for homework. Make a note, take note of these 4 questions, and then go back to the slide which has the bibliography and tell me, what is the name of the actual article that Millet wrote, and what is the name of the website where it was uploaded, and what was the date it was written, and what was the date it was uploaded. This will help to remind you that when you quote internet sources, you actually need 2 dates in your bibliographical entry. Then the second book, give the full name of Van Dyck's publisher, and what is the function of the colon in the Van Dyck entry? Again, this is going to help you to remember, oh yes, I've got to remember, I need a colon in a situation like this. Well, that's it for today, and I want to thank you for doing English 1 and hope you feel very enriched by all you've studied, and I hope some of you will join us when Cornerstone offers English 2 next year. So thanks for everything, and goodbye.